Glenn Susan Sarp, popularly known as Sue, was a single mother of 5 children in 1979. She had divorced her husband, James Chavez, due to his abusive behavior. Her brother, who lived in California, offered assistance so that she and her children could start their lives over. Thus, Sue and her kids left North Carolina and moved to the Golden State. Initially, they stayed in a trailer park for a short period. Sue then decided to move to the Grand Resort, a location in the mountains that had once been a railway terminal leading to the Sierra Nevada. After the railway closed, the town suffered a population decline and tried to reinvent itself as a camping and hiking area, but without success. The owner of the Grand Resort eventually converted some cabins into low-cost rental housing. Sue had an ex-husband who served in the military, and after the divorce, the Navy granted her $250 a month to help start her new life. She also worked part-time at Ketty Oxford. With the few resources she had, she rented Cabin 28 at the Grand Resort in the fall of 1981. In the following months, she worked hard to turn her new mountain community into a permanent home for her children, including John, 15, the eldest. Sheila, the oldest daughter, was 14, while the 2 youngest brothers, Rick and Greg, were 10 and 5 years old, respectively. The family was doing its best to improve their financial situation, and although Sheila was often reserved, they were all well integrated into the community, with the children attending school and making friends. The house they lived in was a small wooden cabin. Upon entering the front door, there was a living room, followed by a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. The girls shared one room, while the 2 youngest boys shared the other. John, the oldest son, had his own space in the basement, which could only be accessed by an external staircase. On April 11th, 1981, the routine in Cabin 28 seemed normal, with the children coming and going throughout the day. A neighbor boy who already knew the family was going to spend the night with the 2 youngest boys. The 3 children had been at home since the afternoon, and John, along with his friend Dana, spent the day out. Sheila and her mother went to pick up John and Dana around 1:30 p.m., and by 3:30 p.m., the 2 teenagers went out again. They planned to return later, and some people saw John and Dana hitchhiking at a corner around 9:30 p.m. That night, the mother and Sheila spent the evening together, and by nightfall, the 2 girls returned to the family home, located next to Cabin 27. Just 5 meters away, in Cabin 27, Sheila would spend the night with friends watching television. Meanwhile, John returned home around 9:30 p.m. The next morning, around 7 a.m., after a sleepover, Sheila's sister Tina returned home and, upon opening the front door, came across a horrifying scene. The living room was in complete chaos. John and Dana, John's friend, were on the floor. Upon seeing the horrific scene, Sheila, who was at the house next door, ran back to get help. While the neighbors tried to calm her, another teenager, James, went to Cabin 28 to check for survivors. The younger children who had been in the house were safe in the bedroom, still asleep. James helped them out through the bedroom window to protect them from seeing the crime scene. Police arrived around 8 a.m. and began investigating the murders. Sue and John had suffered similar injuries. Dana wasn't as fortunate. The injury patterns indicated that his legs had initially been tied, and someone covered his body with a blanket afterward. Investigators found a screen and a piece of plastic that appeared to be from a weapon. A carving knife from Sue's kitchen had been used. Additionally, police found a fingerprint on the handrail of the staircase leading to the back door. There were traces of blood on the walls, ceiling, bedroom doors, and the outer stairway railing, but no signs of the killers were found, suggesting they were not injured during the attack. However, they left behind some DNA on a piece of tape. Due to the initial confusion, police took a while to realize that Tina was missing. Bloodstains on her bed suggested she might have been abducted while asleep. Unfortunately, many hours had passed since her disappearance, lowering the chances of finding her nearby. Neighbors reported hearing screams or muffled groans between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., but they couldn't determine the source and went back to sleep. The surviving younger children claimed to have slept through the incident. The criminals appeared to be aware of their presence in the cabin. Police discovered signs that not all the boys had actually been asleep. Sue had defensive wounds on her arms and hands, indicating that she fought back before being overpowered. Curiously, John and Dana had no defensive wounds or signs of being tied up, which is strange considering the violence of the crime. It seems the victims didn't have a real chance to defend themselves, as results confirmed that 2 different hammers had been used. Despite the significant amount of evidence and some suspects, no arrests were made. Many people believe the police were either incompetent or corrupt, covering up the crime for some reason. Investigators failed to log several pieces of evidence and overlooked important leads. About a month after the murders, Ted, a friend and neighbor of the survivors, mentioned that Justin, another boy from the neighborhood, had been having dreams about the crime. In his dream, he was trying to stop Sue's chest from bleeding using towels and covered her with a blanket. This raised the possibility that he had witnessed the murders and woken up during the event. Justin was placed under hypnosis in an attempt to recall details from that night. He reported watching TV in the bedroom before falling asleep and hearing noises in the living room. He saw Sue with 2 men, one tall, blonde, and mustached, the other shorter, dark-haired, and clean-shaven. Both wore glasses. Justin recalled that the 2 older boys, John and Dana, returned while Sue was talking to the men, which triggered an outburst of rage. Justin also stated that shortly after the events, one of the men took him out through the back door. Although this story is intriguing, it's possible Justin absorbed details from media coverage during the 4 weeks since the events. Furthermore, some sources suggest that in the hypnosis recordings, the police made suggestions that may have influenced Justin's account. Clues indicated that the killers abducted Tina, who was a minor, after the events at the cabin. The initial search for her involved the FBI, but for unknown reasons, they stopped investigating after about a month. On April 22, 1984, Ronald Pedrini found human remains while collecting cans in a forest about 140 kilometers southwest of the cabin. Initially, investigators believed the remains belonged to a Native American, but an anonymous call reported they were Tina's. 2 months later, forensic analysis confirmed the remains were hers. Nearby, a pair of jeans, a blue jacket, a blanket, and an empty surgical tape dispenser were found. However, this evidence did not help identify the perpetrators or determine the cause of death. Martin Smart, Justin's stepfather, became the main suspect based on Justin's description under hypnosis. Martin, also known as Mart, lived with his wife Marilyn and her 2 sons in cabin 26 across the street. Mary and Martin were taking the same typing course as Sue. Mart was described as an unpleasant individual with a criminal record and petty behavior. During interrogation, Martin told police that his blue-handled hammer had gone missing and suggested Justin might have seen something that night without being noticed. However, investigators did not pursue these leads, and Martin was neither arrested nor re-interviewed after the initial questioning. After the incident, Martin left town and moved elsewhere for a while. He moved to Oregon and died in 2000 due to cancer-related complications. It was later revealed that he was a personal friend of the local sheriff, which may have influenced the course of the investigation. It seems Mark confessed to 2 different people, but those confessions were initially concealed. In 2016, new information brought the case back into the spotlight. A counselor of Mate's at the Veterans Administration in Reno reported that Mate had confessed to killing Sue, but not the 2 boys. According to the story, Mate was angry because Sue had left him for someone else. The motive for killing Tina was that she had witnessed everything, and he couldn't allow her to live and tell the story. Other sources claimed that Mate was having an affair with Sue and that his wife found out, prompting him to order the crime. Although the counselor reported these confessions to the police shortly after the murders, the information was not recorded as evidence. Years later, Mate's wife, Mary, claimed to have found one of Sue's jackets in the basement and said she handed it over to the police during the earlier investigation. However, there are no official records of this handover, and the jacket was never used as evidence. In a 2008 documentary, Mary, another person close to Mate, said she believed he was responsible for the crime and that he had confessed in writing in a letter. In the letter, Mate allegedly wrote, "I paid the price for your love, and now that I've bought it with the lives of 4 people, tell me we're done. What more do you want?" The police never accepted this letter as official evidence in the case. A friend known as Jumbo claimed that he lived in the same house as Mate. There are conflicting accounts about how long they had known each other. Some sources suggest they had only met weeks before the murders, while others indicate their friendship had lasted for years. On the night of the crimes, in the cabin where Merlin, Bulbhead, and Hugo, nicknames they went by, lived, Matt and Brad went out together to a local bar. The 3 later returned, but Matt and Brad went out again. When they returned to the bar much later, they were dressed in suits and sunglasses, as if they had attended a business meeting. One theory is that they wanted to draw attention to their appearance. During the interrogation following the murders, Brad told police that he had worked as a police officer in Chicago for 18 years, but this was proven to be false. He also lied about how long he had lived in the area and claimed that Mary was his niece, which was also untrue. Some versions claim that Brad had an obsession with Mary, who had rejected him twice. Despite the lies and contradictions in his story, Brad was not initially considered a suspect by the police. Later, investigators discovered that he had a criminal record and had worked as an enforcer for the Chicago mob. Investigators believe he was cooperating with the Department of Justice as an informant. This might explain the intervention of the Sacramento Department of Justice in the case. What stands out is that instead of sending homicide detectives, organized crime investigators were dispatched to the crime scene, and there is no clarity on what evidence, if any, ties Brad to the crime. This raises even more questions about his possible involvement and the Department of Justice's interest in the case. However, this raises many concerns. If that's why the detectives never properly investigated Brad, it seems they turned a blind eye to many clues and overlooked evidence. Jumbo, who was also known as Brad, left the area and returned to Chicago, where he died in 1988. In 2013, the Plumas County Sheriff hired Gamberger as a special investigator. Gamberger had been a young deputy when the cabin murders occurred in 1974 and worked on every county case except one until his retirement in 1994. The only case he was not allowed to cover was the Kennedy murder. Since being brought back in 2013, Gamberger has made several new discoveries. That year, he located a recording of an anonymous 911 call made after one of the victims' remains mysteriously surfaced. The recording was found at the bottom of a sealed evidence box. Gamberger sent the tape to other law enforcement agencies for analysis in hopes of finding leads. In 2016, a man using a metal detector found a hammer in a dry lake bed near the entrance to the crime scene. The hammer matched the description given during Mate's interrogation. The sheriff believes the hammer was not placed there by accident and that someone intentionally threw it into the water. Additionally, Gamberger also discovered a hunting knife among some debris and sent it for further analysis. Then, in April 2018, DNA from the crime scene was compared with that of a known living suspect. Since then, no arrests have been made and the names have not been released to the public. The investigator also claims that 6 people may be involved in the case. The 2 main suspects are now deceased. As for the suspects still alive, they also seem to be aware of the ongoing investigation and have suggested that everyone should prepare themselves as developments are expected soon. The investigation continues with interviews and several individuals being considered persons of interest. The results of the analyses and testing remain unknown. Regarding the person who gave John and Dana a ride, it appears they identified a woman and interviewed her. Among the circulating theories, the owner of the site 28.com, known as Mark, believes that Mate Scarf was involved in an affair with Big. Mark thinks that at the same time, Mate's wife was advising Mary to leave him. Other investigators do not entirely agree with this view, but there is a belief that Mate may have been an accomplice in some way. Other theories suggest that Sheila collaborated in the murders. Sheila's fingerprints were found on the front porch light bulb, which proves that she not only turned off the porch and street lights, but also unscrewed the bulb to leave the house in darkness, making it easier for the killers to enter. Sheila then allegedly invited herself to sleep at the neighbor's house, something she had never done before, leaving the house free for what was about to happen. She falsely claimed she needed to leave for unspecified reasons. Gamberger, the special investigator, did not specifically mention the DNA found at the crime scene in his public statements. This raises the question of how the DNA will be linked to the suspects or whether it will have any connection to Sheila or other individuals involved. The investigation is still ongoing, and new developments could emerge at any moment. The evidence suggests he was directly involved in the murders. He also made the first call to the police and, during that call, revealed crucial information about the DNA found at the scene, directly implicating himself in the crime. Justin, one of those involved, broke down emotionally and confessed that he had been wondering when these events would come back to haunt him. According to some accounts, Tina was the last victim to die, while Dana was killed first. Tina's body was removed from the scene to alter the actual crime scene. Mary, considered the instigator of the crimes, remained at the site while Tina's body was hidden. The criminals allegedly returned to Cabin 28 around 4:30 a.m. to retrieve Tina's body, which was later abandoned miles away at an old campsite. The case is rich in detail about how the crimes occurred. After the massacre, Sue's surviving children went to live with an aunt in California, but eventually ended up in an orphanage, as the aunt already had many children and couldn't care for them. In several interviews about the horrific incident, Sheila mentioned that she avoids talking about it with her siblings, perhaps to protect them. Relatives of the victims and the public are eagerly awaiting justice for the deaths of Sue, John, Tina, and Dana. Over the years, the resort where the crime took place fell into ruins, and in 2004, Cabin 28 was demolished. The site has been completely abandoned ever since. This case presents many intriguing and complex details. If you found this case interesting and enjoyed the discussion, share your thoughts in the comments. Liking the video and subscribing to the channel really helps us keep bringing you these detailed stories. Thank you for following along, and I'll see you in the next discussion.